Absolute moral values. This is a discussion on the doctrine of absolute morality in which it is shown that moral relativity is the curse of mankind. If everything is relative, then nothing has value. If nothing has value because everything is relative, then value as a category is gone with truth, rationality and hope. If these things are relative not absolute, they do not have any real value. But believers in the physicality of the cosmos, we carry on blind to the effect our beliefs have on our reality. By assuming the impossibility of the absolute, we open ourselves to the uncertainty of a shifting cosmos. Without a standard for determining value, direction and priorities, chose emerges. Money is the measure of value in the marketplace. It is said to have no inherent value. This belief is false. Even though our currency is no longer minted from gold or silver, it contains as much intrinsic value as gold. The value of a currency does not stem from the same factors that give gold its value, but paper money still has a value, because it is a means of exchange, and it is owned by the one who issued it. If it had no value, it would not be used. The German mark, at the onset of the Second World War, was an example of a currency that didn't have value. The fact that our currency is made out of paper is immaterial. It grants access, it is the means to the possession of all else, so it acquires value. Like anything else, it can lose value, as when it is no longer exchangeable for goods and services. Is this different from any other thing, even gold? Things have value, only so long as human beings value them. No value is inherent. All economic values are the consequence of human beings projecting worth onto inanimate goods. The acquiring of value is a reflection and a consequence of mankind's dominion. Whatever value a thing has, it is humans who gave it its value. The values men ascribe to economic goods are not absolute values. The values we give to each other are not absolute. We may resent the fact that our value changes over time and with different people for different reasons. We do not have an absolute value. The value we have with others is given to us by them and is as readily taken away. Have you noticed how a person can be a company's star performer one day, and a liability the next? A liability is best fired with the least fanfare possible. Chaos flows from the extreme fluctuation of relative values. Economies self-destruct from rampant inflation. Wars erupt and companies go belly up because of economic collapse. Even a parent's love can turn deadly. So, most of us believe there is nothing we can be certain of. We see nothing that is absolute in this world, and yet, we cling to certain values, perhaps as the shipwrecked hang on to bits of flotsam, which lend a sense of solidity to an otherwise ephemeral reality. We do not murder, we do not steal, and if we do, it is only with a good explanation. We justify our moral lapses with exclusionary clauses. We all have exceptions to what we claim are our absolute ethical rules. We claim to understand when breaking the law is justified. We live as if our values were relative and as if our morality was a set of suggestions, or an essay on best practices. Except, we all know when an excuse needs to be made. We can do good, and we feel no need to explain why we did something good. But when we do something wrong, there is the excuse. We all know we need to justify our moral lapses. Why? If there is no absolute moral law, how can there be lapses from it? Why do we always need to find an excuse for falling short of a perceived ideal? If right is a relative value and if there is no absolute right or categorical wrong, why do we have a guilty conscience? Why feel bad about murder? Is not the morality of a murderer equal to the morality of a saint? Is the morality of a rapist of a different kind than the morality of the one raped? Why does the rapist feel a need to justify what they have done, when the arresting officer does not? If morality is relative, then the rapist is as moral as the man arresting him and no excuse need be made. If there is no absolute right, then everything is justified. But we know not everything is justified, nor can it be justified. We just are uncertain as to why. If it is right to do what reason tells us to do, then it is right to follow our reason and we need not feel bad about doing what reason tells us to do. But are we getting close to instituting an absolute morality here, or do evil person also follow their reason? Is it necessary or even reasonable to follow reason? Are we required to do what is right, if we can gain an advantage by doing what is wrong? After all, what is reason and what is right? Is our conscience even a real thing to be listened to? What of people who have no conscience or who have found ways of getting around it, as in times of war? moralistic standoff, if we are allowed to excuse moral lapses? If there is more than one morality, then no moral system is truly valid. If absolute relativity is the case, how can relativity itself exist? This is a contradiction of terms. If everything is relative, that is, if relativity is absolute, then truth itself must be relative. If truth is relative, there is no truth. If something is true, it must be absolutely true. The claim that relativity is absolute cannot be true because it cannot be absolutely true according to the claims of relativists. What is truth if it is not an absolute? What is relativity if it is not contingent? We see the need for things to be true to themselves. We understand the absolute necessity of a statement to be either true or false. These things are not foreign to us, but in our normal lives we see nothing that is absolute and a great many things that are relative. We hear about God, but we do not trust Him or those who talk about Him because we cannot comprehend the absoluteness of His existence. God is turned into another relativistic element in a relativistic world. God is made contingent in a reality dominated by us. How then to prove the existence of an absolute in a relativistic world? That is the problem we have. It is a problem that has never been resolved. We do not seem to be able to prove the existence of truth, though one assumes its existence on faith, since otherwise the search for it would be meaningless. We all seem to know God or of Him, though few appear to accept Him the absoluteness of His existence. Proof of Him has been elusive, not because He is elusive, but because He has to be accepted in the absolute sense He exists in, before He can be known. Therein lies the problem. We decide the value of all statements and we do not know the truth. The crux of the problem is tied up in the old paradox of the tree in the forest. Does it make a sound when it falls, if no one is around to hear it? The answer is what we decide, but on what criteria? The answer we give depends how we define the nature of sound. If sound is something we hear, the tree makes no sound. If sound is simply a disturbance in the air, then a sound is made. There are no absolutes outside of logos, the word. The problem is not that we cannot prove absolutes exist. We know there is only 2 by 2 and that is 4. The equation is an absolute. We need to understand that logical and analytical absolutes have meaning to our everyday lives. Absolutes are useful, they are needed and have value. Indeed, it can be argued that absolutes have absolute value. God is absolute, but He can only be known through His work in us. We never know God directly, because unknowable in an absolute sense, but He can be known by His effect on us. Through Him all things have value. Without Him nothing has value. The value we give things which are not of Him are simply rationalizations of the wants of the flesh. Giving ownership to God of all things, puts a different perspective on things. Things obtain a value, because He owns them. It is no longer a case of what use has this for me but of what use can I make of this, for Him. Our use of things is relative, God's use of things is absolute. Without God, people are valuable only because they give value to someone else. A person's value in capitalism is largely defined by businesses. Under communism, human value is determined by the state. Since a person's value is equal to the labor that can extract it from them, they will tend to be exploited. What does it matter to the system if they lose value in their own eyes if they add value to the system? Women become prostitutes and kids gang members as a way to gain value in the eyes of others, though they lose value in an objective sense. Few people see the costs of what they do. They externalize them onto others. They do not have the means to evaluate credits and debits accurately. When people become a possession of God, they take on intrinsic value. But their value is also obtained by how they seek to improve the kingdom of God. But as soon as we talk about obedience to God, we begin to consider sin. Sin is a cost we impose on ourselves. You might ask, what is wrong with fornication? Nothing in and of itself. It is, after all, just sex. Fornication is wrong because it deals in fantasy and illusion. It takes on the illusion of a commitment that is not there. Once we assume the existence of God, we acquire a definitive purpose. We must give value to the things of God. This includes other people and especially those of our own family. This establishes not only purpose, but also reflect the purpose of God. We arrive at truth. Truth is not relative, it is absolute, for truth and God are one. Knowing the truth, one cannot rationally do other than what the truth dictates. The freedom of humanity is a relativistic illusion. It is out of ignorance that we see options. If we knew the truth and the true value of things, we would see only one course of action. If we knew God, we would know there is only one possible response, and that is to follow God and do the things of God. But we rarely see the consequences of our actions, and not knowing the consequences, we do not know the true costs. Being unaware of the true costs of what we do, we are blind to the consequences of our choices, on us and the world. Still, we believe we are rational, though we cannot evaluate the consequences of our decisions. If we are unaware of the full costs of what we do, on what are we basing our decisions? Absolute moral value is absolute value. What has absolute moral value has absolute value. In short, if we have two options open to us, and one choice will create less value than the other, the first option is closed. If we are moral, we have only one choice: to act morally. Moral justice is the true categorical imperative. Moral reason leads us to making the right choices. Choosing right is to choose the course of action that creates the highest value. This is dependent on knowing the full costs of what we do, or we cannot choose right. Herein is the crux of the problem. For in this system of things, there is no way to track true costs. There is no way, in the modern world, to make true moral choices, and therefore, no path to becoming a rational human being. For that, we need to implement the true morality and the moral system expressed as the Church, described in Scripture.